we've started. There we go. Hey, welcome to Black Men Speak. This is your co-host J.R. Stewart,
And good evening, everyone. This is your co-host Tommy Duncan.
and
Welcome,
tonight we
welcome,
have a
welcome.
very special show. It's our Thanksgiving show, and today we like to keep our conversation civil, and let's see if we can find some things to be thankful for. Tom.
Absolutely, I think that's a good idea, man. We are on the eve of celebrating the holiday known as Thanksgiving, which means many things to many people.
True, it does. And so let's start by saying thank you to the group Liquid who provides our theme music. We skipped the intro today. That's my fault. My earpiece is not working today, so I'm gonna have to probably order another one. So for that reason, it creates some technical issues. If I try to play the theme music without it. So Tom, what would you like to be thankful for today?
Man, it's hard to figure out where to even start, man, when we commemorate this holiday, this, I guess, uniquely American holiday. I'm not exactly sure, what other countries, outside of that, but, when we think of the Thanksgiving holiday, we're very thankful for family, we're very thankful for friends, we're very thankful for loved ones, Jimmy, but in the spirit to which we join each other every week to have this conversation, man. I think we've got to be thankful to our forebearers who came before us, who survived the atrocities of the Great Migration, what some people call the Middle Passage, man, so that we could be here. And there are a lot of great names that we could talk about, but we want to thank, from my perspective, those who survived so that we could be here, man, because we stand on very tall shoulders.
Tom, I think throughout world history, I've studied the slavery during the Roman times, um, semi-slavery with the serfdom during the Middle Ages, and the. But I'm gonna say, Tom, I don't know if there's anything that's been more horrific on human by man's inhumanity to man than the Middle Passage. Um, I'm thankful for those who survived, but basically, it cost the lives of about 8 to 10 million slaves just enslaved 12 over here. Those passages were so rough, so many bodies tossed overboard. The sharks would follow the slave ships from Africa all the way to the Americas. Because there was a meal constantly being of bodies being thrown over. So I'm thankful for those who had the strength to survive. But the Middle Passage is still a sore spot with me. Slavery is still a sore spot with me. But I'm thankful for my ancestors who survived it and made it possible for us to be here today.
And Jimmy, on top of that, not only do we thank those who came before us who survived, but we also have to honor those who had the courage to jump. And these aren't the folks who were thrown overboard, Jimmy, but
That is true.
those who had the courage to jump, knowing that it meant death, but they would prefer to die free than to live in enslavement for generations upon generations. So we have to honor not just those who survived the Middle Passage, who survived the atrocities of the worst um, historic enslavement of one group of people by another, probably for the longest period of time, but we also have to honor those who had the courage to jump, meaning that it quite possibly meant the extermination of their gene pool.
Tom, that is true, and that's why it's so horrific for me. And this is why I hate that our educational system and culturally that we allow our kids and the next generation that's coming up to not understand what has happened and the sacrifice that has been made. Um, and so we should always be giving thanks, not just on Thanksgiving, but we should give thanks to those who came before us at all times. And on top of that, we have a debt that needs to be repaid. and they made the down payment and sacrifice, and we should pay some of that back by trying to be the most successful that we can be. I mean, basically, that's what they were fighting for. To give us a
Right.
chance at life, to be successful in life, to understand and participate in the American dream. And when we squander that, we don't live up to our full potential. We allow our kids to be dumbed down, and our culture to be misled and programmed where we work against each other. Those are not the things our ancestors had hoped for. And, and so we have to bring some awareness time where for Thanksgiving to really mean something for us. We need to understand where we come from and what others who've been before us, what they've gone through in order for us to be here, so we can truly give thanks in a meaningful way. I think right now, I mean, we go through the celebration of it, but how many times do we really, really, pay anything back to those who came before us and give thanks?
Right. And I mean, it is a secular holiday. It's not a religious holiday. There really aren't, too many ties technically to religion, kind of, sort of, because at the end of the day, when we consider how the pilgrims from Europe came over here, that was because of religious
Correct.
persecution,
They came for religious freedom.
but that had very little to do with our ancestors, our forefathers, and our foremothers. It had more to do, with the religious wars in Europe that spilled over into the New World, Jimmy, and is beyond the scope of this conversation. You also have to honor the American Indians who have survived this atrocity as well, because we have to remember that we celebrate Thanksgiving as a European or a Eurocentric holiday. But Jimmy, you cannot do that without acknowledging the sacrifice. As bad as the story is for those Africans who came over here, you have to also understand that the American Indians, Arawaks, who were here prior to the Europeans, who, quite frankly, if we look at our history, who traded with Africans for hundreds of years before the Europeans ever landed over here, made a supreme sacrifice as well, because it was their land and it was their country that ended up getting taken over. And that was kind of the beginning of the end for a lot of Indian culture, part of which still survives today, Jimmy, but we have to acknowledge and honor what they sacrificed as well.
Well, that would be true, Tom. So, as we give thanks today, like I said, we always have to look back at those who came before us and the price that they paid, so that we can truly, truly appreciate a day of thanks. And right now, I'm not sure that we're totally there culturally. I know that we're not there, for as remembering our history, remembering our ancestors. I mean, we spent, the first 2 years of the show, we spent trying to educate those who watch the show about our ancestors and about those who came before us. And like I said, it's a shame that more isn't done to pass that history down. In fact, the real shame of all of this, Tom, is that we come from people who did not have a written language, because it was important for them to remember with memory their history. And they passed it down from generation to generation for hundreds of years, if not for thousands of years. They could go back and trace who their fathers were, who their grandfathers were, great grandfathers, and on down the line in the history of the tribe. And so when you were born into that tribe, you had something to be thankful for. You had a long, rich history to remember, for you to live up to. And that's been eradicated, Tom. That's been totally taken away. And unfortunately, we're not fighting hard enough to get it back. It's not, we can say, yeah, it was taken away from us, but at this point, we can reclaim it if we want to, and we're just not doing it. So that's why I say that we're not truly thankful yet. We're not at that point where we need to be truly thankful for where we are.
Right. And I think that, that, to your point, should inspire us to reevaluate and or reconsider how we spend our time during this holiday, to be more specific, not just from a Eurocentric point of view, but looking at it from an African-centered perspective, broad as that may seem. as to how we should celebrate this, other than, of course, getting together, eating a lot of turkey and ham and
And
uh,
watching football,
macaroni and cheese and all that good
sweet
stuff.
potato
Nothing
pie.
wrong with that, but really making sure that we take the time to be thankful for the things that we have sacrificed, that is our ancestors, for the survival, honoring those who, again, made the supreme sacrifice, and really consider reprogramming and reevaluating how we look at Thanksgiving.
Well, Tom, I tell you what, I'm going to start tomorrow. And whenever I say my prayers and give thanks, I am going to give a special thanks to the ancestors. And I know we used to do that as a people. It may be time to bring it back.
Yes,
Widespread. I mean, it's a small thing, but maybe it could be a small step in the right direction because we've been at this for a while. We've been fighting to try to get some traction, um, to try to get folks to open their eyes. I think, that there are probably success stories out there we just don't know about. So we need to keep chipping away, but it can't just be all of us. But let's see if we can encourage others to, when you give thanks at the dinner table tomorrow, give thanks to the ancestors. Do a special toast to your ancestors. For those here in America that came before us and paved the way, and for our African ancestors also.
no, I think that's a great idea, Jimmy. Jimmy, because when you consider it, when the first Thanksgiving celebration occurred in 1620, when the Pilgrims first landed here. A lot of the folks who landed in Massachusetts, got here during a very tough period of time,
Yes,
went through a rough winter. A lot of them died, and if it weren't for the Indians who helped them to figure out, how to grow crops and, literally how to survive, through that period of time, they may not have survived. And so
that's true.
that next year, the governor of Massachusetts basically commemorated a day to give thanks just for them surviving that period of time. And I think in the spirit of that, we can reevaluate, to your point, in thanking our ancestors and looking at it from our experiential point of view, honoring our ancestors that we know, honoring those ancestors that we don't know, so that, Jimmy, we have a life to live and we have
We do.
something to be very thankful for. So I think you bring up a very good point, and something that we need to be very clear and specific about. So let me ask you this. This is a starting point. What would be your recommendation as to, whether it be prayer, whether it be certain ritual? What are some things that we may want to consider, you know, for the Thanksgiving tomorrow and Thanksgiving for the future?
Yeah, I think, Tom, good question. And I think from here going forward, like I said, giving thanks to our ancestors is a good starting point. But then the other thing, Tom, is that at the foundation of our culture, we're going to have to acknowledge and take ownership and responsibility. We can no longer allow life to just blow us in the wind like paper and just go wherever it takes us. We're going to have to realize that those schools that don't educate our children, if we're not getting involved in the school boards to take control of the schools, to make sure they educate our kids properly. And I don't mean the watered down, weak curriculum that somehow the system keeps pumping and pushing down to the schools. I mean, us going in there with a strong desire. I remember reading about some of the early black schools, public schools that were open, and how they had a zero tolerance policy. And Tom, I mean, I know zero tolerance now is acceptable and sought out in many strong schools. There's a lot of private schools, especially, but black schools had this also. And because the educators who taught our kids, who were all black, understood how rough it was out there. They knew they had to prepare these kids and toughen them up. So I'm not down with this new age education where kids are just taught to be cream puffs. That whenever they hear something they don't agree with, they gotta go get in a corner with some Play-Doh and have a safe space. I mean, that is not preparing them. If other cultures want to do that, fine. But our kids need to grow up and to be strong to deal with the things they're going to face in America. So that has to be a starting point. And I'm hoping that maybe honoring your ancestors and those who came before you will be the driving force when you wonder what it's all about and why I'm working so hard, why mom and daddy pushing me to study so hard, why I have to do this. Excuse me. I hope part of the answer is you're doing it for yourself, you're doing it for your family, and you're doing it for all those who came before you and sacrificed blood and life, and wealth a lot of times for you to have this chance. Don't stop squandering your chances. So, this is the time that we need to be rising up, not be falling down. And we got to understand that our place is not at the bottom. We've accepted being at the bottom for far too long. Now's the time for our kids to understand that we're just as smart, we're just as talented as anyone else in this world. And so there are things that we need to do kick-ass wise in that classroom to make people understand that we have arrived. That we're no longer going to be stepping in the doormats where people can step on us and wipe their feet of us.
No, Jimmy, those are very good points, very poignant points, and I think that we have to have a strategy. I
Yes.
think it needs to be very clear. It needs to be very specific. I think when you're talking about setting a tone, it all begins at home. I know we've talked about this on several occasions, but you can't be your child's friend. You have to be their
That
parent,
is true.
which means that you have to be the first in setting the tone. You got to stop asking your child, what it is they want to do, and you have to set a path for them and hold them accountable to it. But you also have to be accountable as a parent as well. Jimmy, I think this year is a very unique year, man, because of the circumstances that we're living through right now in this country in terms of a global healthcare pandemic, where families aren't able to get together in mass as they usually have been able
True.
to. So, first and foremost, folks, for those of you who are listening out there, please be safe and be very careful. If you can, just minimize, the size of your group get-togethers on Thanksgiving. If you can, be very careful. Make sure, again, wash your hands. Be protective at any rate, because you understand that our communities are being impacted probably at a more extreme level than any other community in this country. And so we have to be extremely careful as to how we're doing this. But to that point, when our families do get together, take the time, as Jimmy has spoken so eloquently about, understand the past. Talk about your family's story. I mean, and I understand that it isn't all, roses, and we went through some struggles and we went through some hard times, but help understand and remember what you went through to get here today. But to Jimmy's point, moving forward, what we must have to do in order to become self-sufficient, in order to become economically and politically viable, so that we can have control over our own destiny. That begins with education. That begins with being able to create our own businesses so that we can create our own jobs. That begins with creating a code of conduct.
Yes.
So that we're not accepting mediocrity. We're not accepting failure, and we're holding ourselves accountable. Everyone does not have the same skills and talents, but everybody can find a place so that they can be prosperous, so that they can be successful, because there is no me without we. And so building that foundation where we can all contribute in a very successful and meaningful way is going to help create our community, and is going to allow us to be respected in America and throughout the world.
Tom, you brought up something that I hadn't thought about, the code of conduct. And so we've talked about the economic development. In fact, I am planning to start an investment fund for that sole purpose of inner city investment. And I'm hoping I can attract some, enough groundswell of people. This is not a GoFundMe. This is not a Patreon. I'm not asking for your money. I'm asking for you to invest. So this is with a goal of making money and making you money. But on top of that, that code of conduct is something we need to think about also, and look at coming up with some rules that we can all follow to help us guide us in life, where it's not all spiritual, That's in my throat. Where it's not all spiritual, but it can be based on spiritual philosophy. We want to alienate those who may think that we're trying to preach at them. But there's a lot of wisdom that comes from the Bible, and certainly we can draw on that to put together a few simple rules of conduct. But on top of that, Tom, part of it has to be a holistic approach where we understand that education, economic development, self-determination, all has to be part of the package. You can't just carve away bits and pieces of it to try to make it all work, especially if all of us are going to be delivered one day.
No, that is very good, very much on point. And for those who to whom much is given, much is required.
That is true.
And for those who are the most successful, they should give the most back. And that isn't just in terms of dollars and cents, but that is in terms of knowledge. That is in terms of roadmaps. That is in terms of policy, so that we as a community can become more economically viable, so that we can understand that the bar has to come up if we're going to be successful.
Come way up, Tom.
Absolutely. And ultimately, again, we have to share our wealth, and the greatest wealth is intellectual capital.
That is true. That is so true. And that's another reason, Tom, we have to give back to educating our kids at home and acknowledge that the school system has let us down. I think I was, what is his name? John McHorton, I believe his name, professor from Stanford. I think we read his book years ago, Losing the Race,
right?
Where he basically talks about how the bar is set so low for black kids that they have nothing to strive for. That when C's and D's are acceptable grades by your parents, then you're basically setting them up for failure.
I would agree, Jimmy. And when a parent accepts C's and D's, it's not the child that's failing; it's the parent.
That is true. And so I remember in the book, it's been a while since I read it, but I do remember in the book how he talks about how young black boys in pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade are at the top of the class. I mean, they're outperforming everyone, whites, Asian, girls, it doesn't matter. But by the time they get to middle school, Tom, they're in the back of the classroom and they're at the bottom of the list. How do you go from being the most successful to a total failure in a matter of 5 or 6 years?
It's called socialization.
Yes. So we have to stop this process. Excuse me. I wish I had some water. Now we have to stop this process if we are going to have any chance of saving our young boys. And I'm going to be calling on black women to stop with the nonsense. Stop with all of the drama, men and women. You have to start coming together. If we're going to have any chance of saving our kids, you're going to have to come to the forefront to save them. Stop looking for society and the system to somehow work it out for your kids. It's not happening. It hasn't happened so far, and there's no reason it will happen. So if we don't take ownership of our problems, Tom, our problems will not be solved. And we can't expect other people praying, for other people to come save us, because it's not going to happen.
True. Very true. So we have about 5 minutes left, Jimmy. So with this last 5 minutes, man, what do we want to wrap up, or how do we want to wrap up?
Well, like I said, with these last 5 minutes, let's give thanks, Tom, that we have the opportunity to have a platform here and a voice. It may be a small voice now, but it doesn't matter, because our little light is going to shine. And if it shines on you and you're inspired, then all of it's been worth it. So, and I think, as we, set this forest on fire with our one little match, that match may grow into 2 matches, 3 matches, and before you know it, we may have the critical mass that we need in a voice in society to help influence people. So we're going to give thanks for where we started with nothing, where we are now, and where we're going to be in the future. Because I don't want to die and leave this planet Tom seeing it the way it is. So when I die, I would like to think that we've made some progress and some success where myself and our ancestors can be proud of where we are.
Absolutely, Jimmy. I think that's the most important thing, man, that we can possibly say. between the time that we are born and the time that we leave this earth, that we have made a difference that has helped somebody else, man. And if we can say that, then our life has not been in vain.
That is true. And so, with that, Tom, I'm going to give you the last word. Why don't we end on a prayer, and then you can close it out.
All right. So, who's going to be doing that prayer before we close out?
You're our dedicated reverend, so.
Okay. All right. Then I'll say a very brief prayer. Dear Lord and gracious Father, we thank you for bringing us here again. Um, we thank you for our ancestors. We thank you for our parents, our great-grandparents. We thank you for those, Father, who have sacrificed for us to be here, for the supreme sacrifice that those who came before us have made. Father, continue to encourage us to continue to stand up, be strong men, to be leaders within our communities, to not be afraid of making the hard decisions, but to allow us to be a beacon of light, Father, because you have put a light and you are in us all. And so may your will be done in us individually, may your will be done in us collectively, and may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We thank you, Father, and we thank you for this holiday season that brings us together again. Continue to lift us up, and amen.
Amen. Good prayer. And it may be something we need to start doing, Tom, either start the show on a prayer or end it on a prayer. But like I said, start now, actually. I will be including the ancestors in my prayers. The things I give thanks for. So,
well, folks, we want to thank you again for joining us tonight, Wednesday night, as we do every week, 9:00 p.m. Central, to discuss some of the most provocative issues in our country and across the world. I want to thank my friend of well over 20 years, Jimmy, I think.
Yes.
Jimmy Stewart, and the friendship that we have built through several different levels. And I want to thank you for continuing to challenge me intellectually and emotionally and as a man as well, because they say that iron sharpens iron. So
yes, it does.
We will continue to come together and have these conversations, and we will continue to do the best that we can to lift up our community. So, folks, we will see you next week, Wednesday, 9:00 p.m. for Black Men Speaks. And we want to thank you, and please continue to have a safe, happy, and productive holiday season.